Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about using Heroku Connect to leverage your Salesforce data, and we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. Just as a reminder, we are a publicly traded company, so please make any purchase decisions based on the currently available state of our product. And with that, we want to start by saying thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of things you could be doing today, so thank you for taking the time to spend with us as we talk about the wonderful products that are Heroku and Heroku Connect. I'm Dan Millman. I'm the Heroku Director of Technical Architecture. This is a presentation that I was going to give at Dreamforce and was asked to bring a customer to talk about how customers use Heroku Connect. I reached out to my friend, Jess Carasello. Jess, I'm going to pause so you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. I'm Jess Carasello, and I'm the Senior Manager of Salesforce Administration here at Heroku.
And we will hear more from Jess in just a little bit. As for our agenda today, we're going to talk about moving data in and out of Salesforce. We'll talk about the API considerations, and then we'll pivot to talk about how Heroku Connect is going to simplify everything. Jess is going to take a moment to talk about the advantages for Heroku Connect for developers and administrators. We will then see a demo, and we will show you this awesome little product that we have. At the end of today's presentation, we will answer any questions you might have. You can see from the panel, you can actually ask these questions at any time. We have restricted access so that only the host and the presenters will see the questions you ask, and please ask away. That said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I always like to start here simply because it's just always best to start the day with Calvin and Hobbes. But more on to the challenge that we're actually here today to discuss. So Salesforce as the system of record contains all of this wonderful high-value data, and how can we leverage that across our enterprise? Now, we've always talked about Salesforce as an API first. We've always talked about the Salesforce product, as API first. So if you're thinking, well, you can always build APIs to move the data in and out of Salesforce, you're absolutely correct. And we were just brainstorming, coming up with the ideas that you need to consider if you were going to do this at true production scale. So the first thing we would do would be to identify the data that we wanted to sync. We're just talking about the data itself. We can all agree it's relatively simple. Now, we're going to have to construct that API. So we're going to write a little code to move the data in and out of Salesforce, and we can argue if we want to about the ease with which this can be done. We can talk about how it's various degrees of easy. Some people might view it's a little more complex. I think we can all agree that it's a little harder than just identifying the data itself. Now, when we start to do this at scale, well, we need to actually build that into the logic that we're going to create. And if we're talking about being able to access this data as it changes, we're going to have to get those changes at established intervals. Because we'd be talking about APIs, there's also the consideration of what if something doesn't work, so you need to build in synchronization and retries. Salesforce is a wonderful system, and nobody's going to suggest otherwise, but it is a highly governed system, and we need to make sure that we're going to stay within the API limits of the system. Okay. As long as we're doing all of this, it would be great if there was something of an easy button that would enable you to expand your data model beyond what's contained within the Salesforce boundaries. And of course, if anything should change within our data needs, we've got to really go back to the start and do all of this again. So this sort of puts you in the API management business. And what we're going to talk about through the course of this presentation is getting you out of the API management business. So again, I reached out to my colleague so she could tell us why admins would love Heroku Connect.
Thanks, Dan. Love to talk about this. So I, as an admin, use this tool almost every day. So one of the main reasons why I love Heroku Connect as an admin is because it makes my life easier. As Dan just said, we are kind of out of the business of making a custom API, and Connect is all clicks and not code. So it is very easy to make adjustments on the fly as your business needs change. Next, the Explorer tab allows an admin to be able to go in and troubleshoot quite easily. So you can go in and you can look at the individual objects or tables and then see what rows are being inserted or updated or even deleted. So you can see what information is being passed, and it's just a troubleshooting dream. Another great feature of Heroku Connect is the sync flexibility. So here at Heroku, we're using a bidirectional sync from our Postgres database to Salesforce. So that means that if data changes on either side, it will trigger Heroku Connect and the data will sync to either database. However, Heroku Connect does have the flexibility so that you can configure it to your business needs. And if you needed to, you could have it sync in one way. At my last company that I was at, we were in a multi-org structure where one of the orgs was the primary database. So we configured a one-way Heroku Connect sync to pull information down and then to a Postgres database, and then a bidirectional sync from that Postgres database on different tables so that we could bring the data in without augmenting the primary database. Another feature that I absolutely love as an admin is that Heroku Connect supports large tables, such as external objects. So if you've ever had a stakeholder come to you and say, I absolutely need this ginormous table of data, it's what will power my team, but you don't want to bring it in because it's totally going to eat up all your storage in Salesforce, Heroku Connect can be the solution for this. So Heroku Connect allows you to establish an external object inside Salesforce and connect it inside Heroku Connect while all the data lives in your Postgres database, but is surfaceable and visible inside your Salesforce instance. And one of the last reasons is because Heroku Connect allows us to bring in more data that's not living in Salesforce, which can empower dependent Salesforce systems. So what exactly do I mean by that? So here at Heroku, we're using account engagement, formerly called Pardot, to market to our customers. So we can now bring in data that's related to the individual customer's Heroku use case and pipe that data into Salesforce fields that will sync to account engagement and then make more targeted email messages so that it can better the customer's Heroku use case.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. Now, you're an admin, and I'm sure we have quite a few admins in our audience today. What would you say about Heroku Connect to our developer audience, though?
Sure, let's talk about that. So why would developers love Heroku Connect? Well, similar to me, it makes developers' lives easier because they don't have to code anything, right? So it's all being done through clicks and not code. There's no technical debt that they need to maintain. It's a very manageable product. The Explorer tab also helps them troubleshoot if there's any sort of questions on the other side of the fence from Salesforce. Well, it's looking like this is the exact same list of features, Dan.
Amazing. So we're talking about how wonderful this product is. And if we back up and look at all those same steps that we did before, where we're faced with that same that we had before, we're faced with the same challenge of moving data in and out of Salesforce. Heroku Connect actually makes everything easy. And it's important to also point out that Heroku Connect reduces our application complexity, because from our applications perspective or our portfolio's perspective, we're simply going to be accessing data from a cloud-based database or enriching the data that happens to be in that cloud-based database. The Heroku Connect service is going to be running in the background and keeping everything up to date. And I'm so eager to show this off. We're just going to go ahead and do that. Now, excuse me. So welcome to the Heroku Dashboard, everybody. If you're unfamiliar with this, I'm just going to go ahead and create an application. Now at Heroku, even though we're talking about Heroku Connect, we do take an application-centric view of the world. Even if we're just using Heroku Connect, we're still going to create that application first. The application really isn't going to do, well, anything really. It's just going to be a stake in the ground. But we're going to drive that stake into an AWS region. And then when we provision a database to handle the synchronization where we're going to access our data, that database is going to be provisioned within that same AWS region. So if I was going to create an application, I'd simply come here. I would create a new app. I could give my application a name. I do tend to do a lot of demos, so I put my name on things just to make it easier to clean up afterwards. We can call this application whatever we'd like. The owner here refers to the the teams that I want to share my application with. So right now I'm within my personal space, but I can share it with any team that I happen to be part of. And if I decide to do something like share it with in this case, the other Heroku architects, we have something called private spaces enabled for that team. And a private space is a network isolated Heroku instance. It has an additional set of security features. We can take that all the way into high compliance. And we're going to talk about that in a later presentation as part of this series. Now, functionally, Heroku Connect is going to work similarly regardless of, well, it's going to work identically regardless of where it's deployed. In my example, I'm just going to go ahead and create this application in my personal space. That's fine. And that's going to give me the ability to specify from a deployment region, the United States or Europe. These translate to AWS regions. This would be Virginia or this would be Dublin. If I had private spaces enabled, you can actually deploy private spaces into a different set of geographies around the globe, the US, East or West, as well as a growing list of international destinations. And in this case, I have already set up the connection between my Salesforce instance and my Postgres database. All I really had to do, the step that just didn't work for me a moment ago, was specify the connection parameters for my org. It would have taken me to this screen. I was going to jump over to mappings just simply to show how easily we can create a mapping. Now, these are ones that I've already created. Assuming these didn't exist and we were doing this from scratch the very first time, I would click on create mapping and we're going to see that Heroku Connect is going to poll. Now, it polled there, it went very quickly. It's looking for all of the objects that the ID that we had specified previously has access to. I've configured this previously, so I did specify a system administrator profile. I was just doing a test app. I wanted to show that we had access to everything. And we can see here it is. When we click on the object, it polls again, looking for the fields that we have access to. All I simply have to do is choose the fields that I want to be part of the sync. And at this point, I'm just going to check a couple boxes. What's going to happen, because we're setting, in this case, the account object up for the first time. When I click save, it's going to create the account object for me in the schema that I've specified, in the database that I've specified, and it's going to copy down the values for all of these fields for all of my, in this case, account records. It's going to do that initial synchronization. Beyond that, it's going to poll, and it's just going to copy down the deltas, just the changed fields on just the changed records. Right now, it's going to poll every 10 minutes. We can reduce that to as little as 2 minutes if we like, but we also have the option of listening with the streaming API, and that'll get us the data in near real time. Now, this moves the data down to our Postgres database. If we want to enrich the data once it's in Postgres and store those changes into Salesforce, and I'm not just talking about updates, but inserts and deletes as well, all we have to do is check this box. Now, it is going to give me a warning. This warning is because of the inserts that originate on the Postgres side. They don't yet have that all-important Salesforce ID, and they won't until they're written to Salesforce, and then the updates are written back to Postgres. But there's an easy way around this. Previously, I had gone to my Salesforce instance, I had created a new field on my account object, and I had checked that little box that said this is an external identifier. Doing so, it automatically appears on this list. I'm going to choose it. My warning is going to go away, as we'll see just now. And what I'm saying is that if I don't yet have that Salesforce ID, this field that I didn't even name that creatively, the external ID field, will be used to designate uniqueness. I will click save, and we will see, here it is. It's creating the account table for us in our Salesforce schema in the Postgres database. We didn't map a lot of data. I don't have a lot of account records in this example, and everything is already in sync. Now, this is one of the many really cool parts. If any part about the account mapping should change, there's new fields that are added, or there's new fields that I simply need to expose across my enterprise, all I simply have to do is come out here and click edit. And because of this polling, Heroku Connect will pick up those changes automatically. And I can change anything about the way this has previously been configured. If we didn't have bidirectional sync enabled before, I can enable it now. All I'm going to do here is just check a couple more boxes. Come up here, come back up here. click save. We can see it's altering the database schema. It went so fast, it was kind of a blink and a miss it thing. But you can see we have more fields mapped. I have so little data that I'm automatically back in sync. And that is sort of the Heroku Connect 101. Now, to talk about some of the other really cool features, this is the Explorer tab that Jess mentioned a moment ago. This will enable us to go object by object of the data that we're syncing and compare the data between our Postgres database and our Salesforce instance to ensure that everything is everything's in sync. We also have something called external objects. Now, in this example, this is for a fictional chocolatier that we've created. And for the hundreds of demos that I've probably done over the years, one thing that's been consistent is people seem to like chocolate. So we invented a fictional chocolatier. I'm going to come back here in just a moment, where that's leveraging Salesforce as the system of record. So if we look at the fields if we looked at the objects that we've mapped, you see product and campaign here. This product is where we're storing our delicious array of chocolate products. Campaign is where we're doing our special offers like the Mother's Day special, the end of the school year special, and so on. And you can see we're syncing data. So if anything is going to change in Salesforce as our system of record, this application is going to pick it up automatically. Now, as a user, somebody that's downloaded this app and installed it on my mobile device, I'm going to say, hey, I like chocolate. I'm going to register as a user for this application. The way we've engineered this application is it's going to store that information in the contact record. And if you look here, you can see contact has 2 arrows associated with it. That indicates bidirectional sync. So the app is simply writing to a cloud-based database, creating a new contact record. Heroku Connect is going to replicate that new contact record back to Salesforce. And as a user, the application learns more information about me. Anything that I provide, my contact information, for example, that contact record is going to continue to be updated. Now, the way that we've written this app, we also keep track of the user's behavior within the application. So what they click on, we want to know what products and offers are popular. Anything that they're posting to social media, we just happen to track that as well. We call it interactions, but you'll notice here that there's no interaction object that's being synced back to Salesforce. The reason for that is actually because if this were a real world scenario and I had thousands of users, I might have millions or billions of interactions. And individually, a single interaction might not have a lot of, it doesn't have a lot of meaning. When we look at them together, they tell us about who our users are. They tell us, popularity, if that's how we're looking at them. So we want that information. We just don't necessarily want to store that information within Salesforce. What's happening here is that we're keeping that information in Postgres, and the external objects feature provides an OData endpoint. Here's my interaction table, and all I have to do to expose this interaction table at this OData endpoint is to check this box. There's some credentials here that I'm not going to show you for safety reasons, but within my Salesforce instance, I can then consume interaction as an external object, create a relationship with my contact record, and that way when I look at records within my Salesforce instance, I can see the user's interactions. And let me go and do that now. So we're going to log into this org. And if we look at even my loyalty application, and simply the most recently viewed contacts, Bruce Wayne, he seems to solve a lot of problems. We can see his interaction history here, everything that he clicked on within the application. And I had just created some very simple dashboards to show that we could use the dashboard builder as well on that drag and drop. So again, from our applications perspective, we are simply reading from and writing to a cloud-based database. Heroku Connect is operating in the back, making sure that that data is being kept up to date bidirectionally. And that is actually my demo. So what did we just see? Well, we saw a tool that's ridiculously straightforward to configure and use despite whatever complexities I happen to introduce to it on this call. It's a click and config It's a click and config tool. It's fire and forget. Once we configure everything, it's automatically going to keep that data up to date. If something should change with an object definition, it'll pull down those changes. If something should change in an existing field definition, we change the type of an existing attribute, Heroku Connect will pick that up as well. As I've mentioned, we're talking about reducing application complexity because we've gotten out of the API management business. And again, from our applications perspective, we're simply interacting with a cloud-based database. By its very nature, Heroku Connect is allowing us to leverage Salesforce as a system of record. And with that external objects feature, we've expanded our data model. And that is everything. Now we are ready for questions for real.
Thanks so much, Dan. So we have a question, and I think, Jess, are you gathering some more information on that one, or did you want to answer that one live?
I can answer this one. So as Dan mentioned before when he was showing the configuration for Connect, that he had an admin profile, you'd always want to use like the least level of access, right? However, in this instance, you probably do want to have an integration user that probably has access to everything. But if you do need to pare down what you're bringing, you'd want to configure the level of access, like a profile specific to who your audience is, right? Before you would set up the user credentials to use in Heroku Connect. So you can either go with all access, like how Dan said, as an administrative level, or you could create a custom profile and set up a new user. I would recommend not using your personal user because it's going to show all of these edits, all these syncs as the configured user. So you don't want it to appear like you're making all these updates or inserts yourself for troubleshooting purposes.
Yeah, that would definitely be key. We also have questions about the actual schema and asking about how does Heroku Connect handle changes on the Salesforce side? Like, what does the admin need to do? Is there something specific that the developer needs to do? How does that get coordinated?
So, wonderful question. So, when you're creating the object definition for the first time, it will happen. Now, if something should change in that definition, we're adding attributes, we're deleting attributes. That's actually pretty simple, because as we make those changes and we replicate them through the mapping, if I come out here and I should decide to deselect a field, it'll actually delete the column from our mapping. Now, when that definition changes, it changes from a string field to a numeric field for whatever reason. You may have now a violated data constraint that will be flagged here. And if there's any sort of error that occurs, there will be an icon next to the object and links here that you can drill down into to find out why things are failing. And if it's a matter of we can no longer write to one of the Postgres tables because the object definition doesn't match, it's something that you can fix. And then the process of it being fixed, you can restart the Heroku Connect service and it'll do those retries automatically. By that same token, if you have bidirectional sync enabled and you're trying to write to Salesforce and maybe there's a validation rule that's preventing that data from being written to Salesforce, that'll be flagged here as well. And the same thing will happen. You'll have the ability to correct the object and then automatically retry the errored rows. It's I didn't talk about this. I actually don't get to talk about this very often, but if you have errors, the Heroku Connect service is resilient. So it will do the retries. Just because one row has some sort of constraint doesn't necessarily mean all rows are going to have that same problem. So Heroku Connect will always do what it can. It will flag the errors. It will give you the ability to go back and restart those to ensure that they're going to work as well.
Dan, do you want to show them like where they reload if there is an error, like on this screen?
Absolutely. So it's here on the settings tab. You can see that you can manage both the connection and the Salesforce instance. So you can pause the system from here pause the process from here without having to delete it. If there is an error and you want to retry, all you have to do is come out here and click recover. And then, sorry?
I was going to say, or sometimes what I do is if on the mappings, you can reload the table. So on the down arrows, you can then just, if you wanted to just troubleshoot one object, you can reload now. So then it will go and it'll pull. And if you made changes, you could correct it. Yeah.
I don't have a lot of data, so it's actually going to go very, very fast. But thank you for pointing that out. The other side to this, and I did forget to point this out, is that with our online repository, the Heroku Dev Center, devcenter.heroku.com, you can come out here, you can search for all of our Heroku knowledge. Search through all of our Heroku knowledge. This is publicly available. And if I do quick start Heroku Connect, this demo here will walk you through everything that I just did. In terms of cost, if we go back and we look at the way we have this provisioned, now in this case, I'm not using the original example that I set up. So this is an application, my fictional chocolatier company. Doesn't that look delicious? So there is runtime that's associated with this, but we can see here that I'm running on, I'm actually running on a basic dyno. And then you can see my add-ons. So this dyno is going to cost me $7 a month. The add-ons are right now $50 a month because I'm using a database that's $50 a month. I'm using the free version of Heroku Connect and a free version of Papertrail. If you're going to do this as your own demo, you can use a smaller version of Heroku Postgres. It starts at, and of course I'm blanking on this right now, it starts at $7 or less a month.
All right. We have a question here about, can you talk further about customizing the synchronization process? You kind of showed how it goes against the table and you can specify specific rows. Can different parts of it have a different schedule? Is the question.
Yeah. Great question. And let me go back there. The objects themselves can be set up to sync at different intervals. So yes, you can prioritize what you need. Here, just by looking at these icons, where you see the little lightning bolt, that's using the streaming API. So that's gonna happen in near real time. Everything else is going to use that polling interval, which is going to be somewhere between 2 minutes and 60 minutes. Depending on the frequency of those updates, you can have different polling intervals for different objects.
And then the last one that I had was just around limitations of fields. So are there any limitations on fields and connections there? Jess, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. There's some limitations on calculated fields. So specifically like a formula or a roll-up summary would not trigger an update on that record. It would be another editable field that would trigger an update. And then the most recent value in that calculated field would sync at that time of another field triggering the update, if that makes sense. So a roll-up summary or a formula is calculated every time a page loads. And that's based off of other fields being edited. So that's why it's not triggered in Connect. You can still sync them. It'll give you a little bit of an error message. We use them here at Heroku. So you can just kind of ignore that error a little bit. It still does work,
it's a warning though. It's not an error.
Warning. Yeah, it is a warning. It doesn't like that you're selecting them, but it's still available. So those are the only limitations that I can think of. Dan, do you have any others?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just so excited to talk about this. I just was going to piggyback on what you just said, that if we have a derived field and you say, oh, I want to sync this, and then I'm going to bidirectionally sync this, you'll get that warning that'll specifically say doing a bidirectional sync on this field won't work. The synchronization will still work. the synchronization will still work completely. It's just if you've got X plus Y equals Z,
Yep.
you actually can't update Z unless you update X or Y.
Yeah. And it does support rich text fields. So when you sync rich text fields, it will actually sync to your Postgres database in the HTML format of the rich text field. So you can actually see like the markup on your Postgres database side.
That's a big deal. So excellent. So we had a couple of other questions that were specific to people. Sometimes people do put in as an anonymous question. If you do reach out to me, I have some partner questions that are really specific to partners. I'd love to connect those people who are partners that are on the line today with our colleague who manages partner relationships. Glad to support you in those questions. So please feel free to reach out to us and just let us know your best email address where we can contact you. Any final words, Dan or Jess?
I'm going to go back to saying thank you. As a former developer, I saw the first time I saw the Heroku Connect service I was not yet a Heroku employee. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I love the tools that make it possible to really, well, not worry about managing the infrastructure, and this is a great one in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, echoing what Dan said, and echoing what I said earlier, it's a tool that I use every day and truly does make my life as an admin a lot easier here at Salesforce and other companies that I've worked at. It is a very easy tool to just configure as your business grows.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. And everyone have a great day. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.